apology, which was excruciating, but it was also very liberatory because I finally began to understand, not justify, who my father was. And I came to see that it had very little to do with me.
We have
And
15 seconds, V.
At the end of that book, he was gone, and I realized I didn't want that name anymore. I had no more rancor towards my father, but I wanted my own name that was clear of that patriarchal history, which had never involved my best interests.
Well, I want to thank you all so much for being with us. V, formerly Eve Ensler, playwright, founder of V-Day and 1 Billion Rising, 25th anniversary and 10th anniversary. Her new memoir, Reckoning. And Monique Wilson, as well as Christine Schuler, described her. Thank you.
Hey, this is Joan, and you're listening to...
Tune in 91.3 FM WBNY Mondays 6 p.m. for Mental Health Versus, where Carl Shalahorn mashes up music and mental health in a way you've never heard before. Carl dives into topics such as trauma, depression, and anxiety with compelling guests and captivating music. Mental Health Versus, a show both entertaining and informative. Check out Mental Health Versus Mondays at 6 p.m. on 91.3 FM WBNY.
All right, here we go. Living for the people. This is L. Nathan here, your host for this broadcast, focused on providing insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, you know our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. We're also here with our in-studio audience of one. Norm Ricardo. How you doing, Norm?
Good morning, Mr. Hare. How are you, sir?
You got to have somebody auditing what you're saying. And of course, we have our passport into the 21st century, which is held by the great Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan here.
So I want to take today's program and I want to talk about two things. One that is just building on helping us understand the insanity that is attacking us as a country right now. But another that we're going to talk about in the second half of the program, about another conspiracy. Not a conspiracy of, Republicans saying that, the world was born in the middle of a lava pit, somewhere off of Java. Not that kind of conspiracy. I'm talking about another conspiracy like the state legislative theory. Remember that state legislative theory, Norm, that we talked about, where they said that the legislatures in each of the individual states, that they could just decide on their own who the president was going to be and set aside the votes, even of the citizens in their state. They just set them votes aside and say, now we'll decide.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That conspiracy is still underway. There are cases coming before the Supreme Court where that's going to get tested, but there are at least 3 Supreme Court justices who said they were on board with that crazy theory.
Yeah.
But there's another theory that's starting to make its way through the court system. And this is why it's so important, because courts are not judged by legislatures. If a court makes a decision, that decision becomes law. We keep talking about not having activist judges. You remember for the last 20, 30 years, Willie, they kept talking about this issue with activist judges, essentially making new law with their rulings and whatnot. Well, what they've been doing is they've been appointing activist judges, but they're making rulings that make them rule all over the rest of us all over again. So we're going to spend some time in the second half of the program on this, so don't go away. But quickly, I went to an article written by Lexi Lonis that was in the Hill magazine. It was entitled, "Democrats Slam GOP for Prioritizing Culture Wars and Investigations at First House Education Hearing." You might not have thought this, because I know a lot of you all live in a pristine bubble, where you just have your friends and neighbors talking to you all day, and so you don't really get a lot of understanding about what the rest of the world is about. But the legislature of the United States is supposed to be about governing the United States. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah.
That's what it is, to make sure we got water, that we got clean food, that we have clean air, that we have fair distribution of access to business opportunity and for land, and that children get educated. That sort of stuff governing the United States.
Yes, sir.
You probably heard about that, right?
That's right.
See? Well, the Republicans, they got power in the in the federal legislature now. They're the majority in the House of Representatives. And in the first month in office, what have they done that has anything to do with governing the United States? Have they passed a single bill that talks about redistribution of taxes? Have they passed a single bill talking about managing water resources? We got 200 lakes in the United States that have dried up in the last 10 years. 200 lakes have dried up. Have you seen a single piece of legislation from this Republican-controlled legislature even talking about these things? Not a thing. What are they talking about? Well, I think Hunter Biden hid his computer in a garage in Ukraine. And they didn't talk about it. We kept talking about it, and the media didn't talk about it. That's a conspiracy. Even if it's true. Now, it's not true. But even if it were true, that the media just decided that was just too stupid a story to be spending a whole lot of media time talking about, because even if you talked about it and you said it was true, what difference would it make? Why do you care whether they found the computer in a garage in Ukraine or a garage in Belarus or a garage in Italy? Why would you care where the computer was found? What difference does it make? If you can't tell me what the difference is that it's going to make, why would I waste my time reporting on it?
Right.
But but that's what they're talking about, the Hunter Biden, conspiracy. It upsets them that Hunter Biden used the name of his father. Can I be crude, Willie? I know you don't like it when I go back to the 19th century.
Yeah, go for it.
But in the 19th century, we would have said he pimped his father's name. And he went out to these folks and said, listen, my name is Hunter Biden. That dude over there, he's the vice president. That's my dad. Who's got some game that they want me to play where my name is going to be helpful. Right. You want me for your newspaper? You want me on your board?
Wow.
Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe it is true. But even if it is true, what difference does it make? Donald Trump's daughter, used Donald Trump's name, to sell her cosmetic goods or dresses and whatever it is that she was hustling. Her husband used his father-in-law's name, to enable himself to be able to buy land in Dubai and build, new hotels and all that sort of stuff. So if it wasn't illegal, it may be inappropriate, it may be sordid, but it wasn't illegal. So once you reported it. What else are you going to say about it?
Right.
Man, that Hunter Biden, that Ivanka Trump, they're using their father's name to, for them to get fat. Okay, we all agree on that. Is it illegal? If it's not illegal, then you report it once or twice and you're done with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But instead of working on the issues that the American public said that they wanted, they said they wanted to have jobs. I don't understand this. The American public, remember we went through the Gallup poll that was done in the late part of 2021, where the American public listed out all of these different things they said were their priorities. Mm-hmm. Number one was the economy. Within the economy was jobs. Well, since the time that you had that report, 12.1 million new jobs were created for Americans.
Wonderful.
12.1 million people are working today than were working when Joe Biden took office. That seems like a pretty good job to me.
Yes, sir.
That hasn't been done in any 4-year, any 2-year administration. It really has not been done in any 4-year administration of a president in the United States in the history of the country. Yet, when they poll, the American public a couple of months ago, the American public said, "Oh well, only 32% of us think that Joe Biden's doing a good job on the economy. Donald Trump had an unemployment rate of 6.5%. Y'all thought he was doing smoking. Donald Trump has an unemployment rate of 3.4%, and you tell me he's doing a lukewarm job? What is wrong with you all? It just shows you how the media is under the control of a passel of people who are influencing us to think about things in a way that contradicts what our eyes see and what our ears hear. You in trouble when you don't believe your own eyes and you don't believe your own ears.
That's right.
Norman, you about to say something on that?
Well, as I say, we were getting back to the gaslighting. It's really, really kind of crazy the way that they mislead and misdirect us. But what I'm looking at, it seems like a whole lot of the people are just uninformed. They don't keep, they don't really keep up with what's really going on. And when we're talking about this issue, I guess you can consider it a form of nepotism. Talking about Biden and utilizing his name. It's something that's been going on for centuries. I mean, it is what it is. Listen.
I'm somewhat large in Buffalo. In certain communities, I'm large in Buffalo.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
And when my daughter was coming along and it was time to start getting her jobs, when she was 13, 14 years old,
yeah,
she go out and say, yeah, that's my daddy.
Hey.
L. Nathan Hare. Oh, sign up right over here.
Hey, Mr. Hare, maybe Willie and I might be able to utilize you.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's the game, right? That's you work hard to create a name for yourself, a reputation for yourself, so that other people would say, well, I can trust hiring that person because I know her father. I know his father. Right.
And if you don't utilize that, you're not taking advantage of a right that you have, and it's just you're just saying a name.
How you think all these Irish people ended up being police officers?
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
All these Polish people ended up being in streets and sanitation and whatnot.
Yes, sir.
Because they use their friends and family relationships and so on. That's how they got it done. Don't get mad about it. Try to get some traction. And then once you get some traction, you start expanding your friends and your family to get a chance at those opportunities.
Yeah.
Right. Listen, you get a job working in streets and sanitation, when you're like 10 years in, you're making $50,000, $60,000 a year.
Oh, yeah.
You work another 20 years and you end up with a pension, where you're making $30,000, $40,000 a year on your pension, plus you're getting about $30,000 from your Social Security. You're doing okay. You're not fabulously rich, but you're doing okay.
Quite well.
Why are you upset about that? That's the system, okay? So it's just important to me that we help people understand that these Republicans are not only, how shall I say, they're not only undereducating you, underinforming you, they are disinforming you. They are misinforming you. They're telling you things that are patently not true, or they're not telling you things that you ought to know that really are true. So you're worried about this balloon. They waited until it got over North Carolina before they shot it out of the sky. Well, you should have waited until it got over Baltimore and then shot it out of the sky. You should wait until it got over Chicago and shot it out of the sky. What kind of stupid statement is that, for you to make? The thing had a debris field if it got blown up over land. A debris field that would be about 1,500 feet long. That's about a third of a mile, maybe a quarter of a mile. If you got a debris field of a quarter of a mile, how many places are there in the northern hemisphere that you can fly over for a quarter of a mile and there's nothing below you? There's no buildings.
Right.
There's no cows. There's no people. Of course it made sense to wait until it got someplace where you could blow it up and the debris would fall someplace where there weren't any people. Of course that made sense. Why are these people still whining about that? Now they've had 3 other balloons. Norman, Willie and I were talking about this on the way down. They had 3 more of these balloons, have shown up, right? I don't know where these balloons are coming from. My gut feeling is that they're also Chinese sourced, balloons. I think the Chinese are just messing with us now. They say, oh, you all are so upset about this first balloon. How about 2, 3, and 4 balloons, right? I don't know who it is and what it is, but the United States has done what they're supposed to do. The NORAD, our North American Regional Air Defense Treaty, those organizations, which are made up of Mexico, the United States, and Canada, they did what they're supposed to do. So why are you mad? Why are you mad when you built a system to defend the country against something, and then the system works? You know, it defends the country against something. Why is your mouth poked out, right? But that's what's going on with these Republicans, right? So my question is, the Republicans are using these investigative committees. That's what they've, instead of governing, they're creating committees that never even existed before. They got a committee on weaponizing government against government. Now, who do we know that weaponized government against the government? How about Donald Trump? How about Donald Trump using Jeff Sessions and William Barr, the Attorney Generals for the United States, to be able to attack American citizens and to be able to not bring to account American citizens that were doing wrong? Weren't those American citizens who attacked the Capitol building on January 6th of 2021? Wasn't that American, or 2020? Wasn't that American citizens who did that?
Yes, sir.
Didn't Bill Barr, and his Justice Department slow roll and not prosecute people that should have been prosecuted, because of that? Of course. Yeah. Right? The same thing with the Russian meddling with the election in 2016. All of these things that should have been investigated by Bill Barr were not investigated by Bill Barr, were not investigated by Jeff Sessions, and things that should be investigated where they were withholding money from school districts that had money promised to them, but they withheld that money because they objected to the curriculum that they were teaching in those school districts, something called critical race theory. They weren't even teaching critical race theory. They were just teaching the fact that there's more than one race in the United States. There's Caucasian people, there's Asian people, there's Native American people, there's African people. How is that critical race theory? That's just teaching what is objectively true. When you talk about the economic development of the United States, going from being a set of 13 colonies to becoming the third largest economy on earth within 70 years of its formation, that's a pretty big deal. Historically, you would ask, how did that happen? What were the dynamics that made that come about? Well, you can't talk about that and not talk about the enslavement of 4.5 million African people at a time in 1850. You can't talk about one without talking about the other. But Ron DeSantis and the, oh no, it makes white kids feel bad if they found out that it was racism and enslavement that made it possible for this country to have all the cash that it's got. Come on, let's not be stupid, okay? Now, that's not saying that we're signing off on racism and saying that it's okay. Yeah. It's not saying that oppressing people, exploiting people, and enslaving people is okay. It's to say that these things occurred, and as a consequence of these things occurring, the American society ended up with a humongously advanced economy, and that has supported the development of the United States into being the #1 economy on earth. Now, it was unfair, the things that were done. So you have to talk about the fact that it was unfair and that you need to do things to correct the unfairness and all the things that happened in those populations because of what you did. You got to talk about that. But that's not judging the people today, any more than, you judge, who was that guy, the American Gangster that Denzel Washington played a movie called The American Gangster?
Oh, yeah.
Now, that was in the 1940s and the 1950s, right? You're not judging the 2020 Americans based on what was being done by somebody in 1950. That was terrible what the American Gangster dude, was doing, what the Blackstone Rangers were doing, what the Crips and the Bloods were doing. Those are all terrible things. But we talk about them honestly. That's what happened. And here's the consequence of what happened. And so we need to do things to try to clean up the mess that was made by the evil behavior by people in the past. That's how you deal with that stuff. What's wrong with that? How is that not easy for people to understand?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Hare, the way I look at it, you know what I mean? There's the reality of what's happened and what's occurred in our history is something that should be taught. You know, a lot of kids, a lot of children, they don't even know what the history is because it's not taught to them. So I feel that you know, to not do that is doing yourself a disservice and not worrying about what Ron DeSantis or anybody, you know, the way that they feel is something that should be out there.
And look at microhistory. Sometimes you have to bring your lens down to something very finite so you can understand what's going on in the macro world by looking at what's going on in the micro world. When you go and you see households, take African households where mom was a lawyer, dad was a doctor, mom was a physicist, dad was an Air Force pilot, you know, and so on. Households where the parents had become well-educated and professional people. Yeah. The kids in those households, do you see those kids running around with Gatling guns? Do you see those kids running around, you know, with their skirts in the air like they just don't care? You know, you see those kids going to college too. You see those kids becoming teachers and lawyers and doctors and physicists and engineers. Why? Because they're modeling after their parents. If they didn't have the history of their parents' success, they may not have become successful themselves. Yeah. It's the history of the people that you see, that you're around, that you're able to touch. That's your role model.
Yeah, you should have an opportunity to emulate positive people, and if you can't see that, and you know, it's you may not evolve into what you can be.
And you can learn good and bad. You know, as I've said to many people, you know, people in my family when and I grew up in the late 40s, 50s, 60s. In my era, virtually every man in my family was a hustler. They were either hustling pool, shooting craps. They were boosting cars, boosting clothes. They were turning girls. They were doing all kind of stuff. I'm just being blunt. That was the world that I grew up in.
I understand, right? Yeah.
And so I had choices in front of me. I could try to be large amongst them and prove that I had as much game as they had, or I could say, that don't make any sense. Why are you doing that? I got sisters. I don't want you coming at my sisters, right? Yeah. I will hurt you if you come against my sisters, right? And so I learned from the behaviors of other people, not only that I had possibilities that I could be a better person, but I also had something to tell me what I did not want to be. I don't want to be like them. Exactly. I want to be better than them, right? And so that's what I did. And I went on to school and, you know, I graduated from high school. I got an undergraduate degree. I got a master's degree. I wrote books. I wrote plays. I ran, you know, administrative organizations and so on. And I got large. And I made a lot of other people large. Yes. Because I mentored lots and lots and lots of people using the experiences that I had to help people become encouraged that they could be different than what they have seen. They could be what they could be, not what they've seen other people turn into.
In that and seeing what what your family was doing, if you don't see the negativity and what not to do, you know what I mean? Sometimes you may go just following that way. But when you saw that it wasn't right, it gave you the you knew to go the other way.
I mean, history can encourage you and history can disillusion you. I was maybe 10, 11 years old, and I began to ask myself questions. You telling me that you got a plantation that's got 200 people on it, and there's only 4 white people on the plantation, and they're running the show? And I'm saying to myself, well, if I'm alive in that era, you ain't running that show. You better bring a lot more game than four guns. You need a lot more than that, right? Sir. But that's because I didn't understand what I was talking about, because I was looking at it in a micro lens from the point of view of an 11-year-old child. Right. But when I got older, I began to understand that even though there were only 4 people on the plantation, there were 40 million white people in the country, and there were 10 million African people in the country, And you probably could figure out that 4 beats 10 almost every single time, right? And the white people lived in their country. We were living in their country. We wasn't living in our country. So if you broke away from a plantation, where were you going to go?
Right.
Every place you went was theirs. Nothing was yours.
Right.
So when you understand things in perspective, you see the world differently, right? It's important for you to understand history to help you to understand why things became the way they became, why things didn't move in a different direction than the direction that they moved. It also gives you that learning that helps you to understand, here's where your opportunities are. Here's what you can do to change the reality that you live in to create a new reality for you. You can become encouraged by your history, or you can become disillusioned by your history. To do what DeSantis and what's his name, Greg Abbott, and what's his name in Virginia, Young Lift, whatever his name is in Virginia, to do what these people are doing is sadistic and vile. They're taking history out of the realm of truth and just constructing a history that fits the ideation, the preferences of people that want to keep a dominant culture over everybody else and say that dominant culture is the entire truth and that there is no other truth other than what they say. That just should not be. But it's not just the history stuff. When they talk about these culture wars, instead of working on the issues that are important for the United States, how do we keep, poison out of our food? Did you know that insulin, that 1 out of every 10 Americans needs insulin, and that 80% of the insulin is made in India? Did you know they found metal shavings in the insulin?
Wow, that's horrible.
Because you're manufacturing the insulin overseas, where you can't really monitor it. It used to be manufactured in the United States, but because you were asking for $20 an hour in the United States, and they were only asking for 4 cents an hour in India, maybe I'm off on that number a little bit, but not by much. 4 cents an hour in India, you moved the production facilities from the United States to India to chase that lower cost of labor. But the price you pay for it is quality.
Right.
So now we find ourselves in a situation where a pandemic occurs, the Indian population gets sick from coronavirus just like we got sick. Well, if they get sick and they can't go to work, who's making the insulin?
That's right.
If they ain't making the insulin, where do you go to get the insulin? Now the price of insulin goes from being $10 a shot to being $150 a shot. And then the beat goes on. We wind up getting into more and more oppression from prices and so on because of the scarcity of products that we don't have access to because we were so stupid that we allowed Ronald Reagan, your friend, your friend, the great American president, Ronald Reagan, who championed the idea of offshoring and outsourcing the economy of the United States, particularly the manufacturing economy, to other countries. The price we pay for that, semiconductors are made now, I think about 60% of all semiconductors in fact, it may be more than that, more like 80% of all the semiconductors in the world are made outside of the United States.
And that was a U.S. product, wasn't it?
Not only was it a U.S. product, the U.S. invented semiconductors.
Wow.
The U.S. invented microchips.
What a shame.
So you invent something, you invent the processes for producing something that you invent, and then you allow yourself to get sucked into the idea that, well, these companies can make more profit if they sold that stuff to Ireland.
Well, greed.
Exactly.
Once again, greed.
Just pure greed.
Yeah.
See? But then the day came when the weakness that you created became exploited. Something exploited that weakness. The coronavirus, I don't think the coronavirus has intelligence, but the coronavirus found your weakness. It found out that you weren't paying attention.
Right.
And because you weren't paying attention, the coronavirus was able to jump into your manufacturing systems and leave you without the ability to produce critical goods you needed. You can't produce washing machines without microchips. Go ahead.
It seems like anytime we go and we outsource jobs and send them somewhere else, it weakens our economy. It makes us a weaker country, because we can't we don't have the money that it should be coming to us, and it should be. I don't really know how to say it, but it should be here for us. Not anybody else making money off of the things that we.
The reality is, you should never outsource something that is critical for your existence as a country. You can outsource making lapis lazuli jewelry, because if all the lapis jewelry in the world disappeared, you wouldn't even know it, because you don't use it. It makes no difference to you. But microchips, you can't run your washing machines. You can't operate your car, right? You can't manufacture critical goods and services without microchips and semiconductors.
Things that we definitely need should
so
definitely stay.
You can't outsource that to somebody else. That has to stay here. If it costs more, it just costs more.
Right.
Okay. What's the worst consequence? It costing more or not having it available at all.
Right.
Okay, that's really what your choices are.
Yeah.
So we've had bad leadership in this country. That's how we got into the situation that we're in. Joe Biden is a better leader. I'm not saying he's the best leader, but he's a whole lot better than these people that have been leading us over the course of the past 5 years.
Yes, sir.
We got to, we have to free ourselves. As my daughter used to say, we have to free the Indianapolis 500. We gotta set them cars free. Okay.
Yeah.
So listen, we got to take a quick break and talk to our sponsors. Don't go away. We want to talk about some other issues that are really important here in the United States. So we'll see you on this side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
Protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Tune in 91.3 FM WBNY Mondays 6 p.m. for Mental Health Versus, where Carl Shallahorn mashes up music and mental health in a way you've never heard before. Carl dives into topics such as trauma, depression, and anxiety with compelling guests and captivating music. Mental Health Versus, a show both entertaining and informative. Check out Mental Health Versus Mondays at 6 p.m. on 91.3 FM WBNY.
Yes. Welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan Hare, your host. We're here with Norma Carter, who's our in-studio audience of one. And we're here with our pilot that lets us navigate into the 21st century, Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan Hare. Hey, guys, don't forget, call in 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. And you can also comment on our Facebook, WBNY 91.3 FM.
All right, because we want to hear from you. We like to hear from you and get some sense from you as to what you think about the topics that we're discussing. One of the things that was interesting is that when the Republicans got control of the House of Representatives, they created new committees. I told you about they had this Senate Oversight Committee on the weaponization of government against government, all kind of foolishness and so on. Bobby Scott, a Democrat from Virginia, he is a ranking member, a Democratic member on that Oversight Committee. And he talks about these culture wars as like a euphemism, sort of a cute way of talking about what fundamentally is a campaign to remove the African-American historical experience from the public school curriculums and to remove any inference that there may be more than two biological genders.
Mr. Hare, you said Democratic?
Well, he's a Democrat, but he's talking about these culture wars that the Republicans are fighting.
Talking about, right? Okay.
And that the Republicans are actually trying to endorse an idea or the idea of removing the African American historical experience from the public school curriculum because it would make you feel bad, right?
Is that something that's kind of going through? I mean,
already done in Texas, which has control of about 70% of the market for publishing school books. They've already sanitized school books. You can't find the word slave and so on. You can't find the N word, and things like that. They've already been sanitizing the books that are available to people.
How can that be turned around? Because it is something where people should be informed.
Until you gotta vote for other legislators who will then support legislation to allow corrected history to be taught in the school system. Right now, the Republicans have control over the legislature in Texas, and they're the ones who publish the books. So
I understand, but how many states is this actively?
It's active in all the states. See, Texas not only publishes the textbooks for Texas, because they're such a large state and they've been so invested in the publications business, other states buy their books from Texas rather than publish the books themselves. So whatever Texas is doing winds up infecting what everybody else is doing.
The whole nation.
The whole nation, right? So they've got this campaign underway, to reconstruct education so that it fits the scheme, that the so-called conservatives want to be taught.
Do you believe that was put in place like that for this particular reason?
Yes.
Because it seems like, how in the heck is Texas the only place that's going to be the main publisher of the school books for the whole nation? It don't make sense.
The same way that Texas was trying to get slavery started, in Texas in the 1800s, right? The same way. This is their MO. This is their history. But they don't want you to know their history. See, that's the thing.
Wow. See, this is really crazy.
Right. They want to sanitize that stuff, to erase that stuff from the history that you're taught. So you grow up saying, well, gee, these white people have done all these great things in Texas. Right. They built this oil industry and this energy industry, and, they have these fabulous cities and whatnot. Right. They don't tell you that the industries that were built with taxpayer money. Taxpayers are the ones who dug those wells, who put the water lines in, who put the power lines in, who funded the private companies that were making the investments into developing of the oil industry. Right. That was with public American tax dollars, your tax dollars, right?
So Texas is a red state for sure.
Yeah, very red,
okay.
Fire red.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So during the quote-unquote American Education in Crisis hearing, Bobby Scott discussed how Republicans in some states restrict teaching about certain politics, such as critical race theory, that they are pushing through and you all figure out what these letters mean, anti-LGBTQ bills and banning books from schools. In announcing the hearing, Chairwoman Virginia Fox, she's a Republican from North Carolina, she said, well, the education system needs to focus more on parental rights. Now, what do they mean by parental rights? They mean that you should only be able to teach in schools what the parents want taught. So if the parents in the school district don't want any teaching about the history of policing in, say, Evansville or in Philadelphia or in Baltimore or in Ferguson and so on, then it wouldn't get taught because the parents say, I don't want that taught. So you could have two different school districts side by side, one teaching one history and another teaching a different history. That's what they want done in the United States. That's what they mean by parental control, right? I mean, it's just absolutely insane. Instead of teaching truth and critical reasoning based on truth, Republicans want parents to be taught what the parents want taught, affirming the parents' worldview, regardless of its relationship with the truth.
Well, yeah. Can I be the devil advocate for a second? I want to be devil advocate. So I can understand it just a little bit because we can get off into a thing. Let's say you got a majority, let's say 90% white area.
Right.
And they teach, the things that they feel like is good for them. So what they don't want to happen is that these masses these children coming up start to feel guilty because of what their ancestors or their relatives have done to other people of color or other nations, and feel unworthy. So of course they're going to promote, which they've been doing for probably the past 400, maybe even more years, that, oh yeah, we're great people. We've did this and did that, and kind of minimize what other people have done, whatever advancement other people have done to help them, or how they was able to make their money by, using, free labor from other groups of people, So, and so part of that is like, all right, let's not put a lot of negative information out there for our children. And I could see where in certain areas where it is a predominantly Black area, you're going to want history of advancement of what Black people have done, or people of color advancements. You're going to want more of that than you maybe want in that other community that got 90% of.
Let me shorten what you're asking and give you an example.
Okay.
When the Minneapolis situation occurred with the murder of George Floyd.
Okay.
That was done on television.
Right.
Greg Chauvin kneeled on the neck of George Floyd.
Right.
And he kneeled on this man's neck for almost 10 minutes until the man was dead. And he smirked while he was doing it.
And the other police just stood by just watching him do all this.
Across the country, white people became enraged and motivated.
Right.
Because they said, we didn't believe this. We didn't know that this was really going on all the time. This is really what's been happening?
Right.
Because they were not taught the history.
Well, not only that, in their communities, the policemen are friendly people that help.
Exactly. So their
other
education
communities, they're different.
Right. Their education was police are friendly Giuseppe. Right. They're your friend.
Right.
And it's only those alien, bad acting, dark-skinned people. They're the problem, and this is what we have to do to deal with them.
Right.
But we never do anything wrong. We only do correct things when we deal with them.
Right.
That's the way that the history has been taught.
Right.
But when people saw it in their own face, in their own living rooms, it changed the entire matrix of what was going on in the United States. The whole Black Lives Matter movement, the whole elevation of this discussion about critical race theory, all evolved around that advent of the George Floyd murder.
Yeah, I think this moment was really important, Mr. Hare, because not only like with the other scenes, they seen a little bit and parts were put out there, but they saw it in its entirety, and they saw the evil of this man on this man's neck for many minutes. They saw other police officers just standing by. They saw people going, stop, don't do that. And
17-year-old girl sitting there having to witness this.
Yeah.
Right. See, but my point is that if it had not been for the fact that this came to public attention in such a way that you could not deny it, this would have been swept under the rug like all of the previous history of this was swept under the rug, right? So teaching correct history, if it had been taught in earlier decades, the same movement that we see going on now would have been going on in the 1950s, in the 1930s, and in the 1890s. That same movement would have gone on then. And the kinds of reform movements that took place would have been taking place then, and we'd be in a completely different place in 2023 than we are right now.
By that being said, I'm just asking you, these things, due to the history being shown, in more cases than one, could have been prevented.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Prevented, not in the specific. You couldn't say that you would have prevented this particular thing.
Right.
But the whole pattern of things would have been prevented.
In most cases, it may not have happened due to that.
Because police are supposed to be public servants first.
Right.
In fact, law enforcement is a part of serving the public. In other words, the police don't have to enforce every single law every time they see a law being broken. When I don't know, maybe you all weren't kids, but 70 years ago I was a child, right? And when I was a child, I'd do some childish things. I'd throw water balloons at cars. I mean, I had issues, right? The police would see me doing stuff like that. They didn't pick me up and take me to, a Wendy's and lock me up in the state penitentiary. They said, Nate, what are you doing? Stop doing that. That's dangerous. Don't do that again. You keep doing that, I'm going to put you in the detention facility. Okay, stop doing that. Going back over there where your mama is, and be about some other business. Stop doing that, right? I'd skip school. I live in the Perry Projects, right, near the Valley. So, I'd skip school 4 or school, 2023, and I'd go over to the Kraft Cheese Factory, and shoot craps and whatnot, right?
Now, just excuse me, Nate, as thirsty for knowledge as you were, I can't see you being a school skipper like myself.
I could read on my own time, but when there was an opportunity for me to engage in some misconduct, I joined in, right?
All right.
I had issues, right? But, instead of, Officer McCarthy, arresting me, and putting me through all kinds of changes, he would just run up and, Nate, get over here. Don't run. Do not run. Because if you run, I'm going to have to chase you. And if I got to chase you, I'm going to be mad. And if I'm mad, I'm going to knock you out. Okay? So just come on over here. Okay, officer. I get over there. He said, get in the back. I go get in the back. He take me to school 4. Here's Nate. We found him again. It's 10 o'clock.
Wow.
He should be in school, right? And so on, right? Now, I mean, I didn't always like it, but I like Officer McCarthy because
Officer McCarthy knew you.
Right.
He was part of the community.
That's exactly right. He was a part of my community.
Yeah.
And he played a role in my community. So I knew that I could count on him for safety. I could count on him for information.
Right.
I could count on him to help me. If I had a problem, I couldn't think it out, I come across Officer McCarthy. I said, come on, man, can I talk to you for a second? I go sit in the back seat of his car and we kick, a problem around and he'd give me his ideas.
So now, Mr. Hare, to me, you sound like you had the privilege of white Americans because a lot of us didn't have that.
I did. And I'm sorry y'all didn't have it. But I did. I had a police officer who was willing to be a part of my matrix, my extended community.
Let me be like Willie usually is. Willie likes to play devil's advocate. Mm-hmm. Say Officer McCarthy was a dirty police officer.
See, then it would have been different.
And I'm just saying, now when you look at that and he came completely different, we may not have Nate here today, right now. It's just it's because of the history. This is a
guy, he wasn't a PhD.
Yeah.
He wasn't, fabulously trained in psychology and so on. He was just a good dude.
Yeah.
And he saw the kids in the community as kids in the community that he served. And so he got to know the kids. He got to know their families. He knew my mother's name, and so on. He knew where I lived. And that was a part of the matrix of life that I grew up in, in the Perry Projects.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is that the education that you receive has to be based on truth and then reasoning based on truth. If you have that kind of education, whatever you learn is going to make sense. As you grow, you're going to find your adult experience or your older experiences actually confirm your earlier experiences because they're all based on truth.
Yeah.
That's what really ought to happen.
And I'm going to be truthful too, Mr. Hare. I have witnessed some great officers in my. I
know y'all have. Y'all be trying to.
But we've seen a lot of crooked ones too.
Yeah.
But we have had some great officers.
Well, in my neighborhood, a whole lot more crooked than good ones.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is though, when you look at it, our history as young people growing up, and the way Black men look at the police today, they don't look at the officers in a positive realm. Everything is all negative.
Because the model of policing in this country is based on oppression. It's based on controlling people. It's based on ruling over people. But the reality is, this is in democracy. There's something called a democracy. It means that the government is the government of the people. It's not the government over the people. It's the government of the people. The police are servants of the people. So if you're a servant of the people, you're not running around the community saying, "What are you doing over there? Get on that sidewalk. Get over here. Do this. Do that." That's not your place. See, if you're serving the people, you driving around, you see people walking here and there, you wave at them, they wave at you, and so on, right? You stop every now and then. How you doing, man? I've seen you before. Do you live over here? Yeah, I do. All right. I just want to touch bases, and get to know. I like to know the people in the community that I serve. You talk to people like that, and you develop a matrix where people get used to you and you get used to them. Makes it much easier for you to identify misconduct going on and then figure out what way you want to control that misconduct.
Let me just add, and this is only by something that you taught previously, something that I picked up and learned. It seems to me that the government today and the police officers today are not serving in a democratic capacity. They're more serving in a plutocracy type capacity, which, you know what I mean, serving the rich more so than they are the poor. When it comes, and not serving, I'm saying they're more apt to be on the side or err to the side of the rich than to the side of the poor.
Yeah, but I don't think the model is based on that matrix. I think the model is based more on the matrix of, as you indicated, there's a ruling body, so that there's a class of people that are like the us's, the real Americans.
Yeah.
Then there's a class of people that are the minorities and the others, the non-real Americans, right? And that the police basically serve the communities of the real Americans, right? They do the fish fries, they get the cats out of the trees, and they do all of that sort of stuff. But they control, they oppress. Yeah. They sort of rule over the minority community.
I understand that 100%, but just utilize this as an example. Say that there's a call placed, let's just say it's somewhere out in suburbia. Mm-hmm. The police respond forthwith. Mm-hmm. You try to call them into the inner city neighborhoods, and you don't know when they go.
And they take a longer time to respond.
You know what I mean? It's almost like there's a double standard in certain ways.
Well, there is a double standard. Just like you got two-tier schooling in this country, you got two-tier policing.
Yes, sir.
In this country. So that's important. Let me just get to a couple other things, right? So we're talking about truth. If you remember during the course of the State of the Union address, Joe Biden talked about the fact that the Republicans actually had been attacking Social Security and Medicare, saying that they really wanted to cut those programs, if not get rid of those programs.
Yes,
right?
Sir. Yes, sir.
And in the days that followed, you had Mike Lee and Rick Scott, jumping out saying, "Oh no, that's not true. How can you say such a thing? We would never do anything like that. We're honest, John. No, we'd never do that." Right? Well, I went to an article written by Travis Geddes in an online magazine called Raw Story, and he says this was reporting on a morning TV program called Morning Joe. You ever see that program, Morning Joe? The guy
I've heard of. Yeah.
With the coffee.
Morning
he married
Joe,
the other announcer is Mika Brzezinski. Yeah. They're married, and so Morning Joe cackled at the Mitch McConnell sticking a knife in his would-be Republican rival, Rick Scott. Rick Scott had been running to become the chairperson of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, so he could be the fat cat, in the Senate among the Senate Republicans. And during this the State of the Union's speech, he was reminded. Biden reminded his supporters of the proposal floated by Rick Scott, and that the proposal basically was that we should let the legislation that creates Social Security and Medicare to let them sunset every 5 years, and then if people really wanted to keep that that legislation, they'd have to vote for it all over again, right? Can you imagine if that occurred, especially in the environment that we're in right now? You'd never see Medicare and Medicaid again. You'd be a completely different program.
Yeah.
That's right.
So Mitch McConnell, Republican, majority leader, or had been the majority leader, now he's the minority leader in the Senate. He says, well, Rick Scott's proposal has nothing to do with the Republicans. No, this is just Rick Scott, and it's a bad idea. I think it would be a challenge for him to deal with this in his own reelection in Florida, a state with more elderly people than any other state in America. This is interesting.
Wow.
Mitch McConnell is like the big fat cat Republican.
Yeah.
And who's he throwing up under the bus?
His boy.
Ron Scott, who's his boy, right? And he said, oh, you played, don't put that on me. I don't want to wear that. You have to wear that all by yourself, right?
Yeah.
So Mika Brzezinski, who was hosting that program, she talked about McConnell's chilly remarks. She says, I mean, what else does Mitch McConnell really have to say? It's a bad idea. Biden is completely owning the Republicans on their attempt to own the liberals in so many ways. But in this case, he's calling them out by name.
Right.
He's very joyfully getting into the debate. The bottom line is Rick Scott has a plan that does what Biden said. And now he's lying about it. So too is Mike Lee. There's a film clip of Mike Lee in 2010 where he gets up in front of an audience, I forget where he's the senator, but he gets up in front of his audience and he says, when I'm elected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip Social Security and Medicare up. I'm going to pull it up by its roots and kill that program. Now, he said that, and it's on tape.
Right.
You can't say you didn't say it.
And he just actually seems like killed his own career.
But the Republicans didn't kill him. As long as he runs around and says, well, I know I said some terrible things, but I really don't like black people, and I'm doing everything in my power to keep oppressing black people. He said, okay, we'll accept everything else you're doing as long as you keep, killing black people.
Hey, guys, this is going to make some great television. Like when the movies come out, all of these things that you guys are, putting out there now, they're saying or doing, it's going to make great television.
So that's something that there's another thing that just popped up. You know about the George Santos case, right?
Oh yeah.
The Republican from New York, in Long Island. It turns out that every single thing he said about himself, everything, his name.
Oh, did they prove it?
Everything. His name ain't his name.
Oh, his name ain't George Santos?
He just made up a name.
Wow.
His military record does not exist. His education does not exist. He never went to the school that he said that he went to. They can't even find the school that he did go to, right? I mean, everything about this man is a lie. Everything, right? Wow. And so by now, everybody knows all about him. But I want you to understand there's another piece of game out here. According to another story in the Washington Post, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who's a Republican, also from Florida, she says she's an Air Force veteran and former Obama supporter who used to go by the name Anna Paulina Meyerhofer before she switched parties from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. So she's now a Republican in Congress. She's now a member of the House Freedom Caucus and has argued that House members should be able to carry firearms during committee meetings of the House of Representatives. They should be able to come in, with their Glocks and their M16s and whatnot, right?
Was all of this after the insurrection?
Oh yeah, still going on. They still want to get this done, right?
Okay.
So Luna claimed on the campaign trail that while she is a Christian, her father, George Meyerhofer, raised her as a Messianic Jew and that she's part Ashkenazi Jew. She said these things during an interview with the Jewish Insider, which is a newspaper, and so on. She says, and I'm also a small fraction Ashkenazi. Well, Luna's relatives dispute the fact that not only was her father a Catholic who never practiced any form of Judaism, Her father is Heinrich Meyerhofer, who served in the Nazi army in the 1940s, right?
Wait a minute.
Yeah. And people accused Luna of not only embracing her Hispanic heritage for political gain, but she claims she's the first Mexican-American woman to be elected Congress from Florida. She identified herself in 2015 as white and not of Hispanic origin, but in 2019 she said she was Hispanic when she updated her voter registration. She said she had a difficult childhood. She said her father was addicted to drugs and repeatedly incarcerated. They can't find any record of her father ever been incarcerated anywhere in the United States. That's just another lie.
Wow.
And if you get her picture, if you look up Luna's picture, what's her first name? Maria Luna.
Luna.
If you look up her picture, you will find Anna Paulina Luna.
What is
Anna Paulina Luna?
Anna.
If you look up her case, her picture, you'll see that she looks just like George Santos. She looks like a female version of George Santos. Before I go, just real quickly, one more thing. Just in not more classified documents, although that's out there too. Republicans are using the federal courts to assault Social Security and Medicare. Joe Biden slammed Republicans for their efforts to sunset Social Security and Medicare that we just talked about. All federal legislation sunsets would be in 5 years. Scott had said if a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass the law again. But in an article published in Slate magazine on February 9th, journalist Mark Joseph Stern emphasizes that Republicans have a tool other than Congress for attacking Social Security and Medicare, something called the federal courts. Recently, the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals crafted a theory that would empower courts to strike down mandatory spending on federal programs, compelling Congress to either reappropriate the money or let the programs die. This radical anti-democratic reading of the Constitution would threaten Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Affordable Care Act, unemployment benefits, child nutrition assistance, and much more. Democrats and Republicans would be foolish to ignore the rebellion against federal spending that is brewing in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. This is not a law that's being surfaced. This is a court that is trying to make a new law based on the court's rendering of how a law should be interpreted. The Slate reporter notes that the conservative assault on entitlement programs came up during litigation against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Judge Corey Wilson and two other Donald Trump-appointed judges revoked the Financial Protection Bureau's ability to issue or enforce regulations. In her concurrence, Judge Edith Jones took pains to clarify her reasoning. She said, all appropriations to the executive must be temporally bound. In other words, they have to have a specific time limit. If they don't have a specific time limit, they can be ended based on court decree. Listen, this is the next stage, and maybe the most insidious stage in the Republicans' assault, not just on Medicare and Medicaid, not just on entitlement programs, but on any legislation that does not have a term limit. Thank you all for listening to us and supporting us. We'll get more into this on Wednesday. Look forward to talking to you then here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM, WBNY. We'll see you all then.